Is it good to have lots of things on the go? Or should I try to focus on just one really important thing? So this is a good question, and it relates to a lot of different things that you might be doing in your life. And again, we can see the appeal of either direction here. On one hand, embracing a minimalism, which we talked a bit about last week, is appealing. There's something beautiful about the idea of shedding the pressures and the unnecessary responsibilities of having too much stuff or too many places to go or too many things to do, and just being a little bit more. There's a simplicity in that which gives you a little bit more space then, which itself is useful and can be used for maybe more important things or just a bit of breathing room. However, on the other hand, we can understand that there's a kind of a utility in having things or doing things, and particularly when it comes to goals, there might be a few important things in your life. So it might say, well, if we use the example of the balanced diet, we wouldn't be tempted with a balanced diet to say, well, let's have one good nutrient and stick with that for the sake of being focused and minimalistic. We know that kind of minimalism wouldn't be a good match in terms of health and nutrition. So one word that's helpful here, Swedish word, Lagom, which roughly translates, I'm no good at my Swedish, so feel free to comment here and refine this in a bit more detail, but roughly translates to just the right amount. Not too much, not too little. Goldilocks of the three bears, the one in the middle, something along those lines. So of course there's parallels here to the idea of a middle path in many forms of Eastern philosophy. And that idea of just the right amount, of course, we can admit from the very beginning, mightn't be quite as simple as it sounds. What is just the right amount? However, as a starting point, it's rather useful. Because if you have minimalism as your starting point, you might go out to prune your plants or your trees and take too much off. You might hack the whole thing down. So that would be very unfortunate. So we don't want to remove too many things from our life when those things are maybe resources and utilities. However, again, the other extreme would be to just have too much stuff going on, with the idea that quantity is really the key rather than quality. So at least if as a starting point you've got this idea of, okay, there are trade-offs in either direction. If I have too much stuff, that itself is going to cost me, but too little maybe cost me as well. And the fact that it's not maybe an easy thing to define exactly what the right amount is, actually may be a feature rather than a cost. Because what it forces you to do is to stop and to kind of reflect inwardly a little bit more and to ask that question, well, what is the right amount? And that then leads to the question, well, who am I? What do I need? And that leads to the question of what do I need in this moment as well? Because maybe what I needed last week, I'm done with that, but I need something else today, and then I'll need something else tomorrow, like the example of the balanced diet. Nutrition doesn't exist in a vacuum. You're going to need to tune in to, Michael Phelps, the swimmer, taking thousands and thousands of calories more than the average person, and he looks great. So there's a context to that. He's expending all of those by doing serious training. So what you're doing when you're doing it is going to come into play here. So if we think back to the example of the tree, when you're pruning trees or plants generally, it is true that if there's lots of branches and then twigs coming from the branches and there's a lot going on, that kind of the essential force, the growth of the tree, is being kind of diluted because it's going maybe in too many directions. So that sometimes can be inefficient in terms of a healthy tree or a healthy plant. And as we said, going the other extreme would be a problem too. If you hack away at it too much, well then it doesn't really have anything to work with. So there's a sort of a pruning, I suppose, that's possible, whereby if you're stretched in too many directions in your life, you've got too many things on the go, you start to say, well, yeah, okay, let me focus a little bit. Let me have a general direction here that I'm moving in. But that doesn't need to be so austere that it's just this one thing you do and nothing else outside of it. And in practice, if you were to try to have that one thing, what you'd realize pretty quickly is that that one thing is not one thing anyway, because that one thing, even to achieve that, would require doing other things, and they in turn would require other things as well. So there's a sort of a happy balance, I suppose, that can be found somewhere in the middle, where you're tuning in and you're saying, well, how can I have a sort of a general direction? And within that general direction, kind of a cluster of maybe some key themes or categories or, main topics that you're interested in, a handful of them that matter. And then, of course, there'll be action steps, etc. under that. But there'll be those few kind of branches that are spreading out that are enough to help you keep moving in the right direction. So, as always, share your experience with this. And what do you think? Because this is something that probably varies as well, depending on what you're doing. If you're somebody who produces creative content, you might need to have sort of different things on the go in order to spark your imagination. Maybe that's an issue. Or maybe you're somebody who has kind of more of a well-defined job or role than other people do. So you can actually categorize it all under one major category. And of course, there's different things you do under that, but maybe it feels a little bit more linear in that way. I'm interested to hear, because there probably is some pretty big individual difference in this as well, despite those general principles. If you found this valuable, do like, subscribe, and share. And what's your experience? Do you have any questions or topic suggestions? You can contribute in the comments, on social media using #BodyMindSelf, or at jfl.com.